At this time, I'd like to bring up our first panel on CTFastrack in New Britain.
Hello again. Thank you, David, so much. That was incredibly inspiring. We're really going to miss that brief opportunity when we got to say murder all the time. So get your licks in while you can, folks, because as of this afternoon, we can't do it anymore. One of the things that really struck me, and this isn't going to come as no surprise for those of you who I hope are all familiar with Connecticut Main Street, is the importance of collaboration. Especially when looking at downtowns, when you have so many different stakeholders that when working in concert, that's when the magic happens. And in particular, in discussing, creating transit-oriented development and communities, having that partnership with different stakeholders is so key for success. And I think New Britain is an incredible example of success, and we're extremely lucky today to have our first panel on New Britain and the fast track system that sparked all kinds of downtown development. And so I am going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and also what part they play in this incredible collaboration that makes the magic happen in downtown. So I'll start with you, Jack.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. My name is Jack Benjamin. I'm the Director of Planning Development for the City of New Britain. So my department has 3 formerly separate and distinct offices which were merged under my leadership about 4 years ago. And that's city plan, so zoning and land use issues, managing our POCD, economic development, and community development, which manages all of our federal HUD funds. So my role specifically has been to sort of steward our POCD over the last few years. Ours runs from 2021 to 2031. Nicole was instrumental when she was in my office in helping develop that project. And then additionally to pursue zoning reform in a number of our zoning districts in the town, especially ones focused around either dense neighborhoods or transit-oriented development. And then managing all of our, again, federal HUD funding that is funneled through my office, which has been instrumental in helping doing some of the development work that we've done.
Can you hear me? I'm Eric Amodio, Amodio and Company Real Estate in New Britain, 4th generation commercial real estate brokers and owners and developers. We have significant holdings in New Britain and looking to expand that going forward.
Hi, good morning. I'm Nicole Bosco, Director of the New Britain Downtown District. We are a 4-decade-old downtown special services district pocketed right between 2 cultural little areas, Little Poland and the Barrio Latino. Me and my staff and I, depending on the day, are working on tourism initiatives to get visitation into the downtown area, resident and employee engagement, economic development, event planning always, and again, it just depends on the day.
Thank you. I know that the fast track was obviously a big enticement to bring investment into New Britain. Jack, can you explain how other actions taken by the city incentivize development, and what kind of properties were you looking to bring online with those changes?
Sure. So I'd sort of categorize and bucket the city's actions into three separate buckets. One is infrastructure investment. Something that Mayor Stewart has said a lot is that people invest in cities that invest in themselves. So by the city taking the action to invest in our infrastructure first and foremost was sort of a signal that where we were directing our efforts and where we wanted to promote development. Secondly, is really zoning policy or zoning and land use policy reform, which we've done really in earnest on the backs of our POCD that was adopted in 2021. And then third is housing and mixed-use development financing assistance. So to cover in some detail, the first one with infrastructure investments, most of it surrounded our Complete Streets work, which we really began about 12 years ago during the mayor's first term. And we used a mixture of state and federal financing to get that work done. And it really is talking about or what David was talking about with bringing those sort of realms adjacent to the transit station into a more pedestrian-friendly, public-friendly area, right? And we were able to do that through our rights-of-way in sort of a radial fashion from downtown. So we've done about 10 phases of complete streets work at this point, over $50 million of, again, state, federal, and local investment, a mixture of all three. And that was really to direct pedestrians around downtown in circulation, but also to direct them towards the fast track station in a more pedestrian-friendly way. And you will see this continue to sort of radiate out from the downtown area as we look to some of our neighborhoods and some of our other transit stations, East Main Street and East Street, additionally. So then the second really big piece, and these are almost sort of done chronologically, or were done chronologically in the city, and the second really big piece was zoning reform and land use policy reform. And we initially started to focus on our CBD, our Central Business District, which is coterminous essentially with our downtown TOD zoning, which is just a sort of another layer of incentive-based zoning on top of our CBD. But we looked at initially our bulk standards in the CBD, which were fairly permissive to begin with, but could use some tweaks. And then we expanded the use abilities and the ability to do mixed use in our Central Business District. And then in addition to that, we started to look at our other TOD zones, which were implemented in 2017, but could use some tweaks and re-modernized a little bit. We then looked at a couple other zones, B3 and B1, B3, B1, and B1R, which are all business and or mixed use zones that definitely required a little bit of tweaking. B1 and B3 were still sort of car-centric, auto-centric, large parking requirements, bulk standards that were not conducive to developing walkable neighborhoods. And we looked at B3 first and really started to establish B3 as the second most dense district in the city. If you're familiar with New Britain, Little Poland, or Broad Street, exemplifies our B3 zoning. And then we did tweak our TOD zoning a little bit in some places, and I believe we still have some more work to do there. The third major piece was our housing and mixed-use development financing assistance. So we were able to leverage the newly initiated TIF districts in the state of Connecticut, and we established ours around the same time we did our TOD zoning. We established first a downtown TIF district, which we've been able to leverage to do some gap financing for different projects. And then on the heels of receiving the ARPA funding, we were able to develop a downtown development fund. And what we did with that is if you're using the ARPA funding for development, anything outside of remediation or site work, really, if the money is going into ground-up construction, you need to adopt home regulations. And so because my department also manages our home funding and federal funding, we were able to put together this program that essentially adopted the per unit subsidy limits, fair market rents, and area median income standards that the home program uses. And that we were able to make grants basically on a sliding scale and based on the gap financing required by each of these developments. And to answer the second part of the question, Michelle, we really targeted a variety of properties in our TOD area, especially the downtown station area. So Eric's sort of suite of properties that he owns, we assisted with some sort of renovation projects. They were, examples of existing residential properties that we were able to help renovate and, help save some older buildings. We had a couple conversion projects from office to residential, and then your classic sort of adaptive reuse and mill conversion sort of rounds out the category there. And I'm sorry, ground up new construction was a big part of that as well.
Thank you so much. So Eric, Jack, you did such a great job of outlining a lot of different ways that the city was incentivizing. So we had a combination of zoning reforms and changes to some of that structure and also funding. As a longtime investor in the city, I'd love to hear from you first some of the changes that you've seen over the years and also talk a little bit more about how those changes on the part of the municipality assisted you in your vision of what you were looking to do in downtown.
Sure. So we'll take it way back. My family immigrated from Sicily and started a moving and storage business in 1919 in New Britain. And ever since then has maintained New Britain as home. and has grown from that initial business into the real estate business. Over the years, always buying, acquiring, developing various properties, anything from the smaller apartment buildings, shopping centers, to larger multi-tenant industrial properties. And my dad always likes to tell me the stories of the glory days of New Britain back in the 50s and 60s when he was younger. And he akins it to pre-COVID Manhattan. He says, as a kid, you weren't able to even walk down the streets in downtown New Britain. There were 4 people across on the sidewalks. This was the hardware city of the world. You had factories running 3 shifts a day, 24/7. I think there were 6 movie theaters in downtown alone. I mean, it's just incredible. It's a totally different time and place. And what we've seen, even in the past 10 years, especially in the past 5, we've seen this upward trajectory in downtown New Britain that is really, it's inspiring. And so as local owners and developers, we're really doubling down our efforts. And we're constantly looking at different projects. Jack had mentioned a few existing. We're looking at a few conversion projects actually on my desk right now. And it's really because of the work. We have to give Jack a round of applause here because he doesn't get enough credit for all the work that he does, bringing forth the vision and making it easier for development to happen in New Britain. He mentioned the ARPA funding. That was something that we used on one of our projects within walking distance, I believe, to the CTFastrack. And again, we're very positive about New Britain. Sometimes I hate to talk too positively about it because it creates competition for ourselves, but it's all good. It's a good thing. We would love to see more businesses come back, bring in those basic jobs, which will then drive more housing demand, which then creates, vibrant downtowns, as we know, and then, folks will be spending money in the restaurants, bars, and local shops. So again, we're very positive, and we've seen, like I said, the past 10 years, but really the past 5. Jasco Development has done a lot of ground-up development downtown. I think they really kind of kicked it off for everybody. I have to give them credit. On the brokerage side of things, we have pulled in quite a few outside and in-state investors and developers, and their thesis really is about transportation. And so that's why they're buying up in the local CBD downtown, doing a lot of office to conversion projects. It's been very hot. We had a webinar about that. And we're very positive about it.
Thank you, Eric. So Nicole, you are the executive director, as you mentioned, for the Downtown Special Services District. You're also our Connecticut Main Street member. And I know in your role is to bring to life all of the work that, in partnership with Eric and with Jack, in terms of the feet on the streets, the liveliness of the downtown. Can you explain in a little bit more about your role? And also in particular, it's the property owners that are investing through you in the downtown in terms of sort of bringing that vibrancy to it. How is both the development and the CTFastrack contributed to the work that you do?
So in terms of events, we always want to put on quality events that cater to our city residents, but then also bring in and attract folks from the surrounding towns. In terms of the newer residents coming in, we're constantly evaluating what program we do have going on and what maybe needs to be phased out, and then ultimately what will that be replaced with. Events are a great way to bring in folks, again, from surrounding towns to really highlight and showcase how far we've come as a city and how much we've transformed for the better. Having the CTFastrack station right downtown is instrumental in a lot of our events, actually, because it's alleviating that parking anxiety that folks might have, when you go to a new place and you just can't be bothered to figure out what side streets are designated for, free parking, what garage am I going to go in, how much is it going to cost. If we can get more folks on the CTFastrack to and from downtown New Britain, we're bringing in more folks, which ultimately, again, showcasing the vibrancy that we do have and giving our establishments repeat business. An example that we've really capitalized on the convenience from New Britain to Hartford is our annual Leprechaun Bar Crawl event. We do a full day experience of taking the Fast Track to Hartford for the St. Patrick's Day Parade, and then back where folks go on a coordinated bar hop, basically. But it's a fabulous day for the businesses. They're seeing, hundreds of people come through. Another example would be a Little Poland Festival. It's not necessarily our event, but you have to get off and go up through our upper part of downtown to get to Little Poland, and there's no shuttle service to an off-site parking venue. So as a premier gateway, their success is our success. So as long as we're helping folks get there, we're also doing ourselves a favor by getting the foot traffic downtown. In terms of the businesses, a lot of our Main Street buildings don't have parking in the back, or the owners are taking those spaces versus allocating them for employees. So if the employers are unwilling to provide a parking pass or some sort of stipend to their employees, it's a great tool for them to take Fast Track and not have to worry about paying their own monthly parking garage fee or unforeseen parking tickets, which ultimately will happen. But it's a great incentive for employers to, give a stipend for the Fast Track versus a monthly garage pass. We also have we're fortunate where we have a larger state college right on the Fast Track line, and the university, CCSU, has been really engaged, their student affairs department, specifically this kind of past year, in engaging the students more to get them on and off campus as a part of just their kind of quality of life. So we've really been making strides, getting the students accustomed to using the Fast Track from their CCSU site to downtown and back. The international students can do it with their eyes closed, but unfortunately the Americans need a little work. That was talked about. Yeah, that's sort of
It's a lot
gist
to
of it.
remember. And that's great. Thank you, Nicole. So I have a question now for all of you. Obviously, today's event is dedicated to sort of introspection on the last 10 years of TOD and some thinking ahead. So I'm curious from each of your perspective, do you feel like, at least in New Britain, that those goals of transit-oriented development in terms of jobs, housing, and vibrancy have been reached? What do you see as the next phase of the work that needs to happen?
Sure. So to answer the first question, absolutely not. And I think that we can say that for all of our communities. As much as we can sit here today and celebrate a lot of the work that has been done, there is opportunity to build more and densify and create better public realms around our transit station downtown. I think that work is really never ending, and as markets change and demands changes for different living situations and employment sort of bases change and remote work either fluctuates up or down. I think that there's always ability for our towns and cities to respond to that in real time. So, the work is certainly not done, and you're going to see many more projects come online within the next 24 to 36 months. We have a pipeline of about 730-something units within our walkshed, essentially, that we expect to come online, or we project to come online within the next 2 or 3 years. And then further than that, we have buildings sort of on the periphery of that walkshed that I believe could be good conversion projects or otherwise underutilized and could be reimagined. So the work certainly is not done as far as I'm concerned. And then for the future, what do we see for the future? So I think if we sort of are, again, thinking holistically about how each of these transit-oriented neighborhoods are contributing to our greater transit-oriented communities, there's opportunity there for a variety of transit options to be introduced, right? So the Fast Track has been fantastic, and it really was a seed for all of this work that has been done. But I think we have to think about, in the future, is there a light rail component that ends up being implemented along the Fast Track line, or are there other bus routes that could be optimized for bringing folks in and out of downtown New Britain and our other stations? And I've talked a lot about specifically the work done in and around the downtown TOD area today. But we have two other sort of next frontiers, and that's our East Main Street station and our East Street station. And in East Main Street, we have a fantastic TOD opportunity literally adjacent to our East Main Street Fast Track station, and that is the city's old public works yard, which has just been a real albatross of a property for the last few decades as the neighborhood changed around it. And we have an opportunity there to create this little commercial node and this mixed-use node around East Main Street. We were lucky enough to receive CIF funding to do the site work and brownfields work required to unlock the potential of that property. And then we're planning on putting out an RFP towards the end of the year to find a private developer to partner with on that. And then additionally, East Street. East Street is our station closest to Central Connecticut State University, and I think that one's going to be a real key to help unlock the sort of flow of students from and to downtown New Britain. And along that streetscape, that's pretty much a throughway right now. There's not a lot of businesses that you can stop and patronize, and there's not a lot of foot traffic along that route. So I think turning your eye towards East Street and looking towards some complete streets work there that could be accomplished, and some densification around that can really create more walkability there too. So there's a lot more to do. I'm totally bullish on New Britain. I'll tell anybody that any chance I get. But we're looking, again, more work to do in the central business district, and again, radiating out along our other transit stations. The work there has largely not even begun yet.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Jack on that still a lot more work to do. As was said, Carlos, just not happy, never satisfied, and that's kind of our attitude as well, that, you can't just get to a point and then, put the tools down and walk away. Continuing doing more work. I think for the future, what would be really neat is two things. One, I don't know if it's just a pipe dream of mine, but I would love Fast Track one day to be some type of light rail system. I think that would be really an interesting concept that does well all over the country. I know that with the initial funding, I don't think that was a possibility at the time, but that would be really neat. Another thing is more on a micro-mobility level, which I think we're going to get to. And I think Hartford had this before with super pedestrian, those electric scooters that you just hop on and you can rent. I was down on taking a vacation in Nashville, and if anybody hasn't been to Nashville lately, you have to get down to Nashville, take a weekend. It's incredible. The number of cranes in the air, the development happening there. It was so easy to just pick up one of these scooters on the side of the road. You pay a few dollars, you scan it with your phone, and you can get across town. It could bring you to another transit hub. I think it would expand the usability and the ridership of Fast Track, not only in New Britain, but in other communities as well.
I pretty much reiterate what both panelists said. The Fast Track is so multifaceted too, and as we mentioned, getting people in for events, getting the residents to and from, or commuters to work. But we're also seeing a lot of seniors taking it to doctor's appointments, so it does kind of cater to every age group out there. I do think the young professionals would prefer a light rail system as well. I have to agree with both of you on that. And I think, again, speaking from downtown specifically, there's a ton going on in the city, again, attributed to Jack's office and our current administration, so he's certainly busy. But focused on the downtown site, there's a ton of room for improvement. I think, to reiterate, we're only just beginning. We've come such a long way, but there's still so much more to go, and it's going to be a really exciting, transformative time. And we say that every year, but that's because every year there's something new. So please keep your eye on us. Other weaknesses or gaps, I think I would say more success stories on the Fast Track. I think we may have forgotten about it in a way. Some more marketing around that could go a long way, just sharing how easy and convenient it is. We've certainly tried to do that on a grassroots level, but we can only go so far with our reach. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, this is my last question before we open it up to the audience. And you kind of touched upon it a little bit, but, we've seen and heard a lot of inspiring stories, like you're mentioning Nashville and whatever. And I think a lot of us in Connecticut say, why not us? We're always like, why not us? So I'd love to know from each of you, like, what is maybe like the one thing that's holding, like the thing that's holding us back? And also holding each of you back. Like I know all three of you, and respect all three of you in your commitment to the state, your commitment to your city, the love and the passion that you have to see success in the future. So what is that one thing, in I would say mostly the short term rather than the long term, that you feel is just holding you back?
Sure. So I think just to answer that question, that Connecticut as a whole, and really, the old sort of industrial Northeast and Rust Belt areas is bad zoning. We overlaid bad zoning over existing neighborhoods throughout the 20th century. If I click, is that going to show me my slides?
I hope so.
Okay, so this is just to give you a really brief sort of understanding of the bulk standards around three of the more dense and mixed-use zoning districts in the city. But so that's our central business district. If you see this chart shows you floor area ratio that's allowed based on lot size. Parking spaces required. I went to City Council a few years ago trying to reduce our parking minimum standards in the Central Business District to 0, and they met me at about 0.75 per unit. So, I think just continuing to sort of iterate on parking requirements and then bulk standards that might be holding us back from right-sizing development for our transit stations is really important. That's our Central Business District. That's our B3, which is sort of our second densest district, and there's still a huge, just using floor area ratio kind of as a bellwether, that's a still huge difference between both of those districts as far as density is concerned. And then that's our TOD, which, this represents two of our TOD districts, and that's got a much lower floor area ratio, and again, bulk standards that could probably be improved. So although I believe we're headed in the right direction, New Britain, I do think that there needs to be more adjustment. It's a political process. Obviously, our zoning authority is the zoning committee of the city council, and it's an ongoing challenge to teach them and work with them about what zoning and land use issues really mean and how these things can be tools that help unlock good development. So that would be sort of I think that's both micro and New Britain, even though we've done a lot of work around it, there's still more work to be done. And then Connecticut as a whole, CMDA being the real tool, and a tool to do this, right? It's not a cudgel, it's all carrot and no stick, is really going to hopefully, on the aggregate, bring zoning into the modern era. And we have to remind ourselves with things like parking minimums. A developer can still choose to provide one parking space for every unit if the parking infrastructure in the area allows that, or if their site allows that. But I think just realizing that zoning is the guide for development, and it really needs to be right-sized and made appropriate for the neighborhoods that we're working in.
Thank you. How about you, Eric?
Other than taxes, I would say in a more short-term view, hopefully, I think a huge challenge at a state level, and this impacts everybody, this impacts development, is housing policy. And what I mean by that is, it seems like as an owner, investor, and landlord, every year at the Capitol, more and more and more bills are being proposed that really put a grip on, what they're terming housing providers, landlords, essentially. The reason I think that's such a huge issue to development is that the harder you make it and the less attractive you make it for both in-state and out-of-state developers and investors, the less housing units we're going to realize. There's a statistic going around that Connecticut is short about 100,000 housing units. Give or take, it keeps fluctuating. But the only way you're ever going to get to 0 on that is if you make it easier and easier and you cut the restriction on development. It only makes sense. And one side is saying we're short all of these units, we need to house, we have a housing affordability problem, which I agree with. But I think the free market is going to really balance that out. There's no need to put caps and restrictions on rents. Let the developers build. and they will self-adjust the rents. If they have a 100-unit building that's empty, they're going to bring their rents down to get those units filled. Some other policies that have come up year after year are trying to seal criminal and eviction records so that landlords, they can't even see that in their screening process. You know, it's tricky stuff. So when you get into this kind of micro level, building by building, you don't really know who is applying. You don't know who's moving in. You know, you've got folks, young couple with kids, and then, you know, who knows who their neighbor is. So that's what I think, from our perspective, the housing policy and the kind of the attack on the landlords, that needs to kind of come to a halt.
How about you, Nicole?
Well, I guess after the zoning factor and then the kind of investment development portion, there's the marketing and how you're getting folks into these units. An item that would help us tremendously is just assistance with our gateway program. I mean, we need our signage to direct traffic, and we need folks to have their, see wayfinding signs to orient themselves as to figure out where they go. So a lot of our off-ramps are, state-owned, and streamlined licensing processes would help us tremendously, as well as just, I'll just say money, but to help us run our own internal programs. Yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, well, I would love to take this opportunity to open the floor for questions for anyone that would like to ask our esteemed panelists.
Man, Jack, you got me excited about New Britain. But my question is for Nicole, and it's geared towards maybe accountability of like the downtown district, the New Britain downtown district, the idea of implementing light rail and the business owners, marketing, all this different stuff. How are you going about that integration of all the business owners of the downtown district to understand what implementing light rail would mean economically, and then just for long-term strategy? We're in the 10-year meeting or conference right now. What does 10 years look like for New Britain and that conversation with business owners of the downtown district right now?
Well, I don't necessarily think we've started the light rail conversation, but I think everyone here is open to it. But I guess, the vision is the vibrancy, right? So having that conversation with the business owners, the property owners first, I think, to really envision what they want to see for their properties and how they're going to capitalize on their investment first and foremost, which will ultimately, determine what tenancy they want to have. To grow our vibrancy, but really keeping everyone in line with our strategic plan too, and communicating that from my office, just how they can be more involved, how again you can be investing, or how you can be capitalizing on your investment more, things you should be doing to help us, but also ultimately help your property value. Unfortunately, that's all I can really answer, as we don't really have the light rail thing too far along at this point. Unless you guys can add anything.
Any other questions from the audience? Oh, I see a hand.
Hello there, Chris Edge from the wonderful Berlin town next door. Just wanted to ask you guys how you see the connectivity between communities. I know we are set up as 169 fighting kingdoms, which is idiotic, but it is what it is.
I'm taking your train station.
Makes sense. No, I was just going to talk about kind of how you see communities working together, because I know the housing in New Britain, transit to Berlin. Just wanted to kind of get your opinion. I think we're of a similar mind, all four of us, that communities need to work together, both it's businesses, residents, new housing. I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that, because I think some people look at it as community X, community Y, but it's really a togetherness kind of thing. And just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, so Chris, I think your work with the bus route that extends from downtown New Britain towards the industrial manufacturers in Berlin is a really good example of that, right? So understanding that there are a lot of folks in housing in the downtown New Britain area that don't have cars or should not need to have cars, and yet need to still have a connection to an employment base. That was, it's a fantastic project. It's really forward thinking, and it, you thought of us, you thought of our municipality when you championed that. So, I think transit especially, right? So in Krog, we are united in many instances by the FasTrack line, or by the CT rail line, right? And so thinking about building services and amenities and housing along those lines that complement stations outside of your own municipality, I think is really huge too. So, I would encourage, as municipalities start to look at reforming their zoning and their land use policy and encouraging development and writing their POCDs, look at what the adjacent cities and towns are building along their transit stations. What's something complementary that could be encouraged to be built at your transit station that might just be a couple stops down the line from, say, downtown New Britain?
I would just like to throw in something too. What's so interesting is in thinking about this coordinated effort between towns and cities, thinking about transit, thinking about development, but to also reference like some of the work that Nicole's doing. This is also a great way to think about what businesses you're attracting, what arts and culture you're attracting. How is it complementing the constellation of communities that are in your region? So, so glad that came up. I saw another question.
Yeah, we'll take one more.
There's
I guess this one's to the group. You mentioned brownfields. I was just wondering how brownfields is playing in the development of New Britain. Is this an ongoing process? Do you focus on state or federal or both, or how's that going?
Sure. So, brownfields, like in many legacy industrial communities, are really the biggest impediments to development, right? And the private market is not going to touch a lot of these properties unless their capital stack gap that is represented by that cleanup work is filled. So we are constantly looking to the state and feds when appropriate, and leveraging our own coffers when we're able to do cleanup work and to be involved in these projects, right? And that's really sort of one of the strongest ways to have a public-private partnership and development is to help with brownfields cleanup. So we did use our downtown development fund. We additionally had an environmental remediation fund that we had to set aside out of ARPA, and that specifically went into cleanup work, right? So you had to have a phase 2 and a remedial action plan done in most cases for us to entertain funding that. So yeah, but I think, and brownfields, it's a really expansive definition, right? So, it's not just I learned recently bowling alleys are oftentimes a brownfield because of the whatever substance they used to wax and clean in the alleys or the lanes. So it runs sort of the gamut of properties that you could consider, and a lot of the times you have to assume that something is a brownfield before you assume it's not. But really, getting the assistance from the state, the feds to unlock those properties is really critical.
Thank you. Please give an applause to our panelists here.